Claire, could you please start the live stream, and we will get on with the penultimate meeting of Angus Council. Right, colleagues, agenda item number 1, apologies for...
Provost, there's apologies from Councillor Davey and Councillor Sturrock today.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, item 2. Are there any colleagues who want to declare an interest? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, item 7, report 3922. I feel I've got a connection to this matter, as I'm chairperson of a charity in Montrose, or the charity rather, received a donation from a company involved in this project in response to a fundraising campaign that's currently live. Communication was also received in regard to this from a director of the project. I'm mindful under the code of conduct that it's an objective test and not my own motivation which is relevant, and I wish to avoid any perception of a conflict of interest. Therefore, declare an interest and not take part in the item.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Salmond.
Yeah, mine is also item 7, report 3922. It's a non-financial interest which I've declared previously on many occasions, that I know and have worked with many of the committee members of this project on other projects, so I'm going to leave the meeting and play no part in the decision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Salmond. Councillor Lumgear.
Agenda item 6, I'm a director of Angus Alive.
Thanks for that, Councillor Lumgear. Actually, the new rules state that yourself and Councillor Duff, Councillor Devine and myself, because we are representatives of the council, we didn't have to declare an interest in that one.
Okay,
so
right.
we didn't have to declare an interest. And I got advice from Mrs. Buchanan, our legal officer, this morning about it.
Okay, right. Thank you for that, Provost.
Okay, thank you. There'll be no further declarations. I'd like to move on to item number 3, minutes of councils and committees. Known for approval. Are they approved? Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. And then sub-paragraph 2 of paragraph 3, or item 3, all for noting. Are they all noted?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item number 4, a motion by Councillor Duff, developer contribution monitoring. Now, before I ask Councillor Duff if he'll present his motion, I'd just like to get Joel Patterson to maybe give a wee bit of explanation on this. Joel?
Thank you, Provost. Yes, so in respect of developer contributions monitoring report, we previously undertook to prepare a report back in 2015, and it's a report reference 354/15, and it's in respect of annual monitoring of developer contributions and effectively spend. The 2019 Planning Act actually introduces a new requirement for an annual report to be published by all local authorities, and although this aspect of the Planning Act is not yet in place, we're content to bring forward that requirement and bring forward a report to Development Standards Committee after the summer recess, reporting on all the planning obligations that we have in Angus Council, those that have been entered into, those from previous years, and what funds are available and where those have been spent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Councillor Duff, in light of that, do you still want to put forward your motion?
Sorry, yes, please, Provost.
Thank you very much. 5 minutes, Councillor Duff.
Okay, thanks, Provost. This is a simple motion. It certainly won't take 5 minutes. It's a previous good practice that regular reports went to Development Standards Committee on developer contributions, and I referenced the report 35415 in my motion, and I think the clerks have circulated that to elected members. I'm unclear why this good practice, which occurred in 2015, stopped. The late Bob Spink, who was a former councillor for Arbroath, East and Lunan, who formerly sat on development standards, was very insistent that this report should be brought forward regularly, and I think he was correct. For those that don't know him, Bob Spink was a long-standing independent councillor for Arbroath and East and Lunan, and I think was well respected by all members for his work. This obviously relates to matters that I raised with Council at our last meeting in December, and I have been in discussion with Audit Scotland about the matter this year. As Ms Patterson has said, the Planning Act 2019 actually requires this as a legal requirement, and she's gone through the various pieces of information that are now required by law. So my motion requires something that's now a legal requirement, as well as desirable to keep elected members and the public informed on these matters, which should make it non-contentious. I'm requesting that a variation paragraph is added to the report that clearly indicates changes to elected members. This would make it clear if a planning obligation had not been paid, or if an agreement had subsequently been successfully challenged by a developer. As you've heard, the Planning Department are content with the proposals and will introduce this report later on this year. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. I'm sure you're second. There's Councillor Braze who's got his hand up. Councillor Braze.
Yes, Provost, thank you. I do second Councillor Duff's motion. I don't need to speak much on this. It's very clear and quite straightforward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just thank Jill Patterson for the update, but also Councillor Duff for bringing this motion forward, and I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Provost. Likewise, I'm very happy to support Councillor Duff's motion, and in his good words, good practice, I'll be pleased to see a report coming forward for the developer contributions, and more than happy to support Councillor Duff's motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Yes, I welcome Councillor Duff's motion. Section 75 agreements, or Section 106 if you're south of the border, cover many areas. As we can see from the report in 2015, I think this has to be at least annual, if not 6 monthly. There are many areas where developers will seek to make commuted sums rather than provide affordable housing, and then we have difficulty in obtaining the commuted sum. I think if that matter was reported on a regular basis to members, then members might just be inclined to name and shame. So I think it's something that should be brought forward. I think it's something that has to be brought forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Councillor.
Thanks, Provost, and likewise I support Councillor Duff's motion, and quite timely for it as well. I just wondered whether the legislation or whether there's any sort of legal issues in terms of how far back can we go, and if by looking at previous and developer contributions, if we find they have not been paid, how far back can we go to make sure they do get paid? Is there any restrictions on that? I'm not saying that we will find them, but just in case we do, because obviously the council is, well, we'll find out in March very soon how strapped for cash the council is, and if there's money owed to the council, we really need to be doing our very, very best to make sure we get it.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hand. Very, very relevant point. Ms Patterson, would you be able to maybe assist in that?
Yes, I'm happy to, Provost. So, as by their natures, go back a number of years because payments are collected on a phased basis, and sometimes you can find that a Section 75, passes 20, 25 years, a significant period of time for larger scale housing developments. So part of the monitoring report, we will require to review all the Section 75s that are in place, and that will be a robust review of ensuring that those are all up to date. And equally, sometimes the wording of the Section 75s vary, so we'll be quite clear in the report what those contributions relate to, what status they're at, and where they're at in terms of their position. So I hope that addresses your query, Councillor Hands.
Okay, you happy with that, Councillor Hand?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor King?
Thank you, Provost. I just want to back up Councillor Duff with his comments about our late Councillor Spink and the way that Bob Spink pursued the this report on a very regular basis. I found it a very useful report when it was being produced. I hadn't noticed, particularly over the restricted way that we've been working for the past 2 years, that it hadn't been coming forward, but clearly Councillor Duff did. But I certainly found it a useful report, and it certainly pinpointed where there were areas of difficulty in getting matters paid. Councillor Moore has referred to the frequency with which developers want to go for a commuted sum instead of providing affordable housing. And that's the sum that we really need to get, because if developers are not providing the amount of affordable housing they should be in their developments, but they're giving us a commuted sum, we have to get that money. We've also got to get land and be able to build on it. So it's an extremely important point where we should be getting that report and making sure that developers are paying us. Because I understand there are occasions when developers stop just short of when there is a trigger point for affordable housing, and we don't get the money. And that's the sort of thing we should be jumping down on very, very heavily. And perhaps we should be looking at not providing that sort of breakpoint in Section 75 agreements in future. It should be payable on every house that's built, regardless of whether they've reached a trigger point or not, so that we can get ahead without affordable housing.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor King. Some good points there, well done. Thank you. Councillor Boyd?
Yes, thank you, Provost. Councillor King's beaten me to most of what I was about to say. The highest regard, of course, as all of you know, for Councillor Spink, who I think on many a time was known as the voice of reason within Angus Council, and he is sadly missed. But adding to what the other councillors have said, I just would like clarification within the report of when it was dropped. Was it just dropped for COVID, or was it dropped earlier on? Just clarification of that so we can find out where did the council start getting this wrong. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Patterson, can you offer any answers on that? Councillor Boyd's question about when we stopped doing
The last report was the 2015 report. It was before my time, but I have inquired with officers, and I think it's what I can only safely say it's one of these things that's dropped by the wayside and slipped off the radar in terms of provision of that report, and I can only apologise for that. It's been pertinent for Councillor Duff to bring it up in line with the requirements of the 2019 Act. So it is very timeous in terms of bringing that forward and making sure we're up to date. What I can assure members with is the process of securing, reviewing Section 75 payments has been ongoing during that time, and it's only been the reporting of that to members that there has been this slippage in terms of provision of the report, but can assure you that all the processes that are in place are carried through on a daily basis.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Councillor Boyd, are you happy with that explanation?
Yes, it's just sad to think it was around about the time when sadly Councillor Spink did pass away or retired gracefully because of ill health, that it seemed to have been dropped off at that point in time. So a bit sad in some ways. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Councillor Duff, you'd just like to summarise? I think we're all agreed that'd be your motion. You just want a quick summary?
Thanks, Provost. Be very quick. Yes, I think I'm very pleased to hear the words from the planning department and from Ms Patterson. I think she seems to have got a grip of where we need to be. I'm also quite gratified with the support from elected members. I think this is perhaps just one of those things that we've all missed, and it was only a month or two ago that I realised myself that we used to get a report and I hadn't seen it for a while, and I did a bit of searching and I finally came across the one from 2015. So yeah, happy to bring it forward, and thanks very much for your support.
Colleagues, is the motion agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
We move now on to the agenda item number 5, changes to order of reference of committees, the Development Standards Committee, and I'm going to ask Ms Patterson again to lead on this.
Thank you, Provost. So this report brings forward some procedural changes in line with requirements of the 2019 Planning Act, which have come into force, and require some changes to the orders of reference to committee. So at the moment, planning applications that require a predetermination hearing, i.e. those are national development or a major development which is significantly contrary to the development plan, would be required to be determined by full council. The provisions of the 2019 Act remove the requirements. I'll not bore you down with the detail of the different acts, but remove that provision, and there's no longer that legal requirement for those types of applications to be reported to full council. So the proposal is to change the order of reference so that those types of applications now be reported to Development Standards Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms Patterson. Are there any questions? Are there any comments?
Yes, I welcome this report.
The number, Councillor Hans was up number 1, so sorry about that. You have to mark time. Councillor Hans, sorry about that. Carry on.
I think my keyboard was having a wee bit of delay from when I pressed it. No, it was just a quick question. Whilst I understand, in the majority of cases, removing that need for full council to look at a major development, there are some circumstances where ward members might not be on development standards, because we've had configuration of development standards committees where some wards are not represented at all, and you may have the potential of a significant planning application that is actually quite significant in the ward, but there won't be that local knowledge within development standards. So although the default position could be that they don't go to full council, is there the potential where it's deemed necessary for some to do so? Because I'm a bit concerned that we've had Strathmartin, for example, that's been an ongoing development. It's progressing now, but for a number of years that would have been really, really difficult if local ward members hadn't been involved with that. So I think I'm just a wee bit concerned that you could be excluding participation of ward members for some major planning applications within their wards.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Hans. Ms Patterson, would you like to reply?
So the provision actually just relates to those of a national development and major developments which are significantly contrary to the development plan. So as it stands at the moment, any types of major development which are not contrary or not deemed significantly contrary would at present go to Development Standards Committee. At the moment, there's and this will continue, as provision for local members to attend and report to Development Standards Committee, even though they don't sit on the committee. So they're able to address that committee, and that will remain in place. But at the moment, the provisions as taken through the Act are just that all applications are determined at the Development Standards Committee, unless it's those delegated to service leader.
Okay, thanks for that, Ms Patterson. Councillor Hans, I what was said.
Just come back on that very, very briefly. Attendance at development standards is very different to being able to have a vote and to be able to participate in the actual meeting. So It's very, very different if ward members have the potential to be excluded, and it's the major developments quite often are the ones that cause the most problems within a ward.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the major development, of course, it goes to full council, and I take cognizance of what you're saying. But I think that the committee is there, and if you want to attend, I mean, I remember attending about wind farms 10 years ago, and addressing the committee then. But if it's a major development, of course, it is brought to full council. Okay, Councillor Lumgear, you had your hand up and you took it down, and I'm sorry.
Yes, I was just well, as the Container Development Standards, I was just supporting this report, so perhaps I could speak after Councillor Breeze.
All right, okay. But I'll tell you what, Councillor, Miss Patterson had her hand up as well, and she was maybe going to reply to Councillor Hand. So, do you want to say anything?
It was just to clarify a point that, as it stands in terms of the order of references and the proposed changes, all applications would be that are not delegated to service leader would go to development standards, and at present there's no provision for any applications to go to full council, so that would require a further amendment.
No, I was on a major, a major which we've had in the past, but that's fine.
No, it's just to clarify. Yeah, any major developments would still go to development standards rather than full council.
Okay.
So it's just to clarify that.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Brace. Sorry, keep you waiting.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, Provost. I think Anne's brought up a very important issue here. I can't say I'm entirely comfortable with this proposal, and the reason for that is just as Councillor Hands expressed, and it was very obvious at our planning committee meeting on Tuesday. And I think Councillor Fotheringham raised the issue of local elected members representing their people. And we have to think very carefully about this, and it does deserve proper consideration. Our whole planning system is based on democracy. That's why we have a development standards committee that's made up of elected members. It would be an awful lot easier, quicker, cheaper if the decision was just taken by a planning officers at perhaps another local authority. We have a planning committee because the legislation requires it, and the legislation requires it because it's felt that there's a need for democratic representation in these decisions. I think we have to think very carefully before we take that away from elected members, all elected members, and reduce their ability, especially on bigger applications. I'd be an awful lot more comfortable if we quickly find that it would be better to have certain applications heard by full council, then we could quickly resume to that position.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Brace. Councillor Lumgear, I know you've got your hand up, but twice you tried to speak.
Yes, okay, I was just supporting this report. Recent changes to planning legislation have removed the requirements of certain applications to be heard by full council. This report seeks to update our procedures to reflect those legislative changes. The revised procedures will ensure that the decisions on major development proposals are determined at the committee and by those councillors that have the greatest knowledge and expertise in relation to land use and planning decisions. The Development Standards Committee has continually demonstrated its ability to make difficult decisions on major planning applications in a matter that ensures Angus and remains a good place to live and work. We saw this on Tuesday when the committee determined a major proposal for a large-scale solar farm. All planning decisions require exercise of judgment, and it is right that those councillors with the most expertise in relation to decision making on planning matters decide the most complex planning applications. As convener of the Development Standards, I support the support.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor MacDonald.
Apologies, my camera's not. Provost, I think you may have inadvertently confused matters for councillors in this meeting. Can you just clarify your understanding of what it is that we are addressing here? Because as I understand it, the changes are being made so that full council will not decide on these planning matters, but you, as I understand what you said, indicated that might be the case. So is your understanding, what is the understanding of that? Just so we're clear as to where we're actually dealing with, because I would hate to think that we make a decision here and we're not as fully informed as we maybe, think we are.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I mean, what we're actually dealing with is the recommendation set out in paragraph 1, which is agree the deletion of section 5 and the rest of that. It's up paragraph 2, the amendment to section 5.4 and the remainder of that. And then section 3, agree to amend section 7C of the scheme of delegation and in paragraph 4, note that the review of the order of reference of committees is underway through the governing member officer working group, and that a report will be brought forward to the full council in due course. And that's where I think that's where the meat of this is going to come in. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Provost. Yes, I was actually going to ask the same question as Councillor MacDonald, just to make sure that everybody was aware we were not going to be taking major planning decisions at full council. They were going to be taken at development standards. I support the comments by Councillor Hans and Councillor Braze. I do have some concerns around this as well. And while I appreciate Councillor Lumgair's comments about the expertise of development standards, what is equally important is local knowledge in these important decisions. The other thing is, I don't know if Ms Patterson fully answered Sheila's question regarding, although the requirement to take it to full council has been taken away, do we still have the option to take certain planning decisions at full council?
Okay, Ms Patterson, could you answer that one?
Yes, I'm happy to come back on that.
Whiteside's made very relevant.
Yes, I'm happy to come back on that. So the changes to the 2019 Act have removed the legal requirement for any application that requires a predetermination hearing to be considered by full council, but that option does still exist if members wanted to follow that. So just to summarise, at the moment, applications which are significantly contrary to the development plan, i.e. those that require a predetermination hearing, so all applications that would, under the requirements of planning, require a pre-application predetermination hearing would at present be considered by full council. This proposal changes that to those applications being considered at Development Standards Committee. So I hope that helps clarify and provide a summary of that.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much for that. Yeah. Councillor Bray.
Could I please speak again, Provost? On
you go.
Thank you. So from what you've said, Ms Patterson, am I assuming that in the future, for major applications, should we agree this change, then major applications will be heard by the planning committee, but you indicated the option still existed for those apps to be put to full council instead. Who would decide? Would it be the planning committee that would look at a major application and take a view that this particular application should really be heard by full council? Would they decide that, or who might decide that?
So, I was just going to say, could I bring in my colleague Jackie Buchanan just to cover the current arrangements in terms of, a decision at a committee being referred to another decision, and then I'm happy to come back on the other point.
Thanks.
Okay. Right. Okay, Councillor Moore.
Can we hear from Mrs. Buchanan first, please?
Yep.
Provost, can I come in with what used to happen a number of years ago
Go
before
on.
we hear from Mrs. Buchanan?
I'm always interested in history. Yep, please. Well, Miss Patterson.
This situation has been around for most of my time as a councillor. However, it's only in the past 10 or so years that hearings have been held by full council. Prior to that, they were held by the Development Standards Committee, but a modified Development Standards Committee, to which all members of council were invited to attend, to speak and to have a vote. And perhaps that's the way we should be looking to return. That if there is a major development which would have been heard by full council, then we have a special meeting of development standards to which all members of council are invited to attend and have the ability to speak and vote. That gave local members the opportunity to speak on major applications. I'm thinking particularly of ones that occurred in Kirriemuir quite some time ago, which were held in Webster's High School, where it was a meeting of the Development Standards Committee, not a meeting of council, and all members were invited to attend. I'm also thinking of ones that were held in Arbroath, where it was all members of council and all members were allowed to attend. So that is the alternative that we have, that we could build that into standing orders, whereby a major application that was deemed sufficiently important to have local members' input, then the membership of development standards for that particular meeting could be expanded. However, it did raise the problem of members who were not well enough trained in the aspects of development standards, who tended to bring in matters which were not relevant to the law as it applies to development standards. So there's a double-edged sword, but that is the alternative that was used probably prior to 2007, maybe a little bit before.
Councillor King, I do remember the Kirriemuir scenario. It was to do with a supermarket, and I was chairman of the community council and spoke on that. I think what you've said is absolutely right for the last part. You know, development standard planning, you need a degree of competence and knowledge, and that's where I think that the falling into the system that we've got should be. Ms. Patterson, have you got the answers for Councillor Grace yet? You were going to be.
We're going to bring in my colleague Jackie Buchanan to answer the question around reference from one committee to another in terms of the procedures, and then I'll come back on the sort of changes to order of reference thereafter, if that's okay.
Okay. Right. Councillor Brace, is that an old hand? Could you still waiting on your question being answered? So that's what we're talking about. Okay.
Yes, and I might want to come back on that, Robert. Okay, well, hear from Jackie.
Councillor Moore, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I've asked that we hear from Mrs. Buchanan first, though, please.
Well, we're still waiting. Ms. Buchanan?
Thank you, Provost. In terms of the standing orders, as they currently are, there's nothing that allows expressly for a planning matter to be referred to full council. There are provisions that allow other committees and other matters to, if it's actually just following a division, they can refer matters to full council. But excluded from that is the ability of development standards to do that, because excluded are quasi-judicial matters. There certainly is, as Ms. Patterson was saying, there's nothing to prevent that being built in somehow, and we could certainly look to do that, but we would need to have a look at the standing orders and come back. It's not something that we would be able to do today.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Ms. Buchanan. Okay, Councillor Brace, you heard what Ms. Buchanan said.
Yes, well, thanks, Provost, and thanks, Ms. Buchanan. A little bit more clarity. I'm well aware, of course, that in 3 months' time, a new one will be elected, and it might have a very different group of people on it, and they might want take a different course with this. Would I be right in thinking that if we agree to this today, then the 6-month rule would apply, and this decision could be revisited by a new council if they thought that full council was a more appropriate place to decide national big applications?
Yeah, quite right. 6 months ago, and it could be brought back in 6 months' time.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that. Where are we? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I presume that the letters will still be sent out to advise members of a major development, even if it's going to development standards. So I think that might cover one thing. The option to send it to full council. Where I come from, members could ask for an application being considered at one committee, one planning committee, to be referred to a higher one, up to and including full council. I would think that there should be some way that we could manage that. It's an issue that really should go through the governance MOG, because at the moment the governance MOG is looking at the standing orders and the order of reference to committees, etc. And I think that would be a very correct place for it to be. But the other issue that has been raised, which is not rocket science, members on development standards, there are 13 members of development standards, there are 8 wards, so after the election it should be possible for one member of each ward, as it's a non-political organisation, for one member to go on development standards and, if necessary, keep the other members of that ward advised.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Moore. And I think the point that you made about subparagraph 4 is very relevant, about the governance member officer working group. Councillor Hans, you've still got your hands up.
Just very briefly, you let Councillor Brace come back in, so I'm just going to come back in really quickly, because it was just to point out that the new legislation states it's no longer legally required to go to full council. There's actually still nothing stopping us using the existing practice that we have right now. And Councillor Moore mentioned about after the next election about having ward representation on development standards. I would still think that's quite difficult, because it really doesn't always happen. And maybe one of the other options then is to increase the membership of development standards, because members can't obviously be substituted due to the nature of the committee itself. So maybe you need to have 2 members per ward. There might be a variation for the 3-member wards rather than the 4. But I would think from the 4-member wards, if you were going to do that, you'd be looking to have 2 members represented from that ward. But I mean, I just think in normal circumstances, a lot of this won't be that significant. But there are these ones that are really quite contentious, and I heard what was being said about people on development standards having the training. There's still training given to elected members on planning matters when we've had to look at them. And there's still, in terms of looking and reviewing the policies, as elected members, we've all had a responsibility to be involved at one stage or another in the local development plans or the regional development plans as well. So although some of us are not on development standards, we're not novices either.
Yeah, okay, good point. Thanks very much, Councillor Hans. Councillor Lumgear. You're muted, Councillor Lumgear. You're muted.
I know I'm muted, Tom. This report deals with new planning legislation, and we're dealing with new legislation. Where I'm hearing this is not complying as in this report. Can you enlighten me on this? Whatever the legislation means in this, that I thought this is new changes that this report seeks to pass and agree on. New legislation.
Did you want me to come in there, Provost?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask. I didn't know whether Mr. Councillor O'Meara had finished or not. Yeah, please do.
So yeah, the 2019 Planning Act, I'll not go into all the sections and things, but it repeals the provision. But what it says is that it's no longer a legal requirement that planning applications that require a predetermination hearing must be determined by full council. That was in the previous act. That said all applications that are subject to a predetermination hearing must be determined by full council. That part of the act now repeals that provision, so there's no longer that requirement legally to do that. However, it is if members still wished for those applications to go to a full council, they would need to make a subsequent change to the order of reference than what we've proposed today. So at the moment, we're proposing today to amend the order of reference, to change it from to align with the requirements of the Act, that remove that legal requirement. But if members do not agree with that position, there's still scope for them to change the order of reference further to request that those applications go to full council. I hope that assists.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Ms. Patterson. Councillor Gear, your hand's still up. You're obviously not finished.
Yes, okay. Yes. No, well, I've read the report and I would be moving that we agree to this report as it is before us. I'm moving that as a motion.
Yeah, you're moving the report. Okay. Councillor Cheek.
Thanks, Provost. I've just been listening to this with interest. And I think Councillor Hans makes a very good point that it's a legal requirement to do this. And bearing in mind what other members have said about, we're coming to the end of this council, is it not worthwhile deferring this decision today until after the new council is elected? Because it just seems to be that there's a bit of misunderstanding around the table as to what is really being involved here. And we don't think we're either really, no disrespect to anybody, but I don't think I just get that feeling we're not fully understanding the implications of this. And as it's not a legal requirement, I think we could defer it. And to answer the point about member wards and representatives, I think that's a good point brought forward. But councillors working together in their own wards, it only requires one representative from each ward and development stand, as far as I'm concerned, and it's all about cross-functional working. I think we should in future. There's no reason to increase it to two members from a ward. I think we've got cover in every single ward anyway, and we would in future, or people when we're actually recommending members to committees. Parties and members should bear that in mind, that each committee should have at least one member from each ward on them to represent them. But on this issue, I just wonder, Mrs. Patterson, is it possible that this can be simply just deferred to the new council being elected, so that, because it's affecting them going forward, and there's a number of people in here who won't be on that council.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Cheap. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I just would want to pick up one or 2 points that have been made. The quota idea that Councillor Hans suggested was tried, I think, a number of years ago, and I think there were issues with it. So I wouldn't support that. I don't actually think local members necessarily make better decisions either. I think there are reasons why sometimes people who are not being badgered in the street by their constituents actually might make a better decision. I think whether it's in my ward or not, if I don't know much about a development standards matter, what I've done over the last 10 years since I've been on development standards, and that is I do a drive-by, I have a look at it myself, so that I understand the context. I mean, the slide presentations and the description by development by planning officer is good, but sometimes there is no substitute for actually seeing something with your own eyes. So in terms of the big issue, whether it should be held by full council or by development standards, as I've been on development standards for 10 years, I'm kind of sitting on the fence on this one. It doesn't matter to me. That's a very selfish thing, because I would have had a say whatever happened. But I can see both sides of the argument, and I don't think I feel strongly one way or the other.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor Hand, you've spoken, you know, more than one occasion, and so has Councillor Moore. Councillor King, I'll let you speak. Let's keep it brief, please.
Yeah, sorry. Just to give a possible notice of an amendment then, I think I would agree with Councillor Cheap that we should defer this because that there are issues to be considered. If you're not minded to defer the motion today, then I would just simply like to put an amendment forward that we don't change the, gosh, I forgot what the term I want to use. Oh, what is it? Sorry, the order of, somebody help me out there.
Order of reference.
Order of reference, and we keep the option for major planning applications to go to full council. But I would agree with Councillor Cheap, it probably should be deferred so that we can look at it further.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, if Councillor Cheap is moving deferral to the new council, I will second that. I would also ask that it is referred to the governance MOG, because I think they're the most appropriate group to be looking at this, along with all the other standing orders, etc.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Moore. Councillor King.
Yeah, me unmuted now. Yes, I again also would support Councillor Cheap for a deferral, and Councillor Moore in his suggestion that it comes to the governance MOG. This really should have been run past the governance MOG before it came before us, because it is involving a significant change to start. And the last time a significant change to standing orders for the came to the council was in fact to enforce membership across the wards. That was introduced not to introduce the membership across the wards, but to remove 4 of the experienced SNP councillors from development standards. They knew too much. That was introduced by a prominent administration councillor at the time in 2009. And it had a disastrous effect, because then development standards ran without those 4 councillors for the rest of the time of that administration, because councillors were able or prepared to take up these places. What happened was the number on development standards was reduced to about 9 instead of 13. It could very well happen again if you enforce the situation of a specified number from each ward. And at that time, it was 2 members from a 4-member ward and 1 member from a 3-member ward. So I would caution very much against allocations of specific numbers from individual wards, because at that time it was used to gerrymander the structure of the development standards.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor King. Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I've listened to this debate, and it's very interesting. I'm too to believe with what Councillor Cheap is saying, not because I always agree with him, because we don't always agree, but it works well in Canusty and it works everywhere else. There's always 1 member on that, and because of other business interests, you find that you can't sometimes be on a committee. Let's just be honest. I can't go on planning because of other various business interests I have, so I just stay off it. But sorry, Councillor Duff, back to what you said about you can't be badgered in the High Street. It's me that gets badgered in the High Street because Councillor Cheap can't make comment because he's on that Development Standards Committee. So yeah, I get badgered about it, but I think so therefore I think it works well how it goes just now. And I actually, to be honest, I actually like being on and I'll have the choices when we're talking about the big choices that are made, about big developments that are going on. I would like to think that when we're building another 300 houses in Carnoustie, or as an example, that I don't get the chance to have any say in that, because that's probably the biggest thing I have in my mailbox from people is about the 300 done, and there's not enough for the health centre, and there's not enough for the enough school, all the stuff that we all understand is going on. So I personally, when it comes to the big stuff, would like to see that in front of full council, so that I can then get the chance to make the right decisions for Angus. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Graves, you've spoken, and there's others who haven't, so I'm going to have the list at the moment. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, as a member of the Development Standards Committee, and I hear what Councillor Boyd said, it's not always possible to have every ward, and we've got all the wards in Angus represented on each committee. So I think at this point in time, this should be deferred. I think it's absolutely correct that major planning applications should be referred to full council. And as Councillor Boyd says, that every member then has a chance to have their input. Obviously, we're on the committee as best as we can, but I think major planning applications, and as Councillor Boyd's just touched on it, should be referred to full council so that every single member that's elected by the public have their chance to have their input. Thank you.
Okay. Ms Patterson, you've got your hand up. I'll let you come in.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I was just going to come in the pre-election period and wondered about a suggestion of allow current applications to be determined in advance of the election and revisit the decision thereafter. This is to avoid applications being considered on non-determination if we're unable to hear those at a committee in advance of the election.
Right, thanks for that. Okay, we've got to Fairweather. Councillor Fairweather.
Right, thanks, Provost. Like Councillor Duff, the 6 and 2 3s, right for me. But I'd like to thank the convener for going with his officers' paper. I have no issues with this being deferred. What I do have an issue with is the fact that an administration, as Councillor King put forward, was gerrymandering. Can I just remind Councillor King, the prominent member that put forward the proposal, Peter Neild, what he put forward, as always at that time, there was an amendment came in from the then leader of the opposition, which was Rob Murray. They agreed that it was agreed, and that was how the SNP members were removed. There was certainly no gerrymandering from the then administration. But I remember, and right after it, I did hear a comment that said it was like turkeys voting for Christmas. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Fair. Councillor Miles.
Yes, it was just similar clarification, Provost. The proposal that caused all the problems before was put forward by Councillor Rob Murray. It was a proposal by the administration at the time to try and get every ward represented, and Councillor Murray came in with the proposal that SNP then didn't like, and that's what caused the furore, because that was accepted.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks very much. But I think that's history. We're now looking at the issues today. I'll let Councillor Bray speak, and then if we're going to move an amendment or move the motion, we should move on with this. Okay, Councillor Bray, your final.
Very much, Provost. I appreciate it when this is such an important matter, I think. One other relevant factor is that there's every indication that the Development Standards Committee is going to lose an awful lot of experience at this election. And we don't know what the new Development Standards Committee is going to look like, what its makeup will be, or how much experience there will be on it. And what's suggested here is that that new committee is going to have these massive decisions to make. I think really we need to defer this so that at least if we're going to proceed with it, the new Development Standards Committee can get their feet under the table and gain some experience before they're landed, them and them alone, with massive decisions that affect the whole county. Because if these decisions are made by full council, at least in the early days, there's much more chance of having some experience still there. So I certainly support a deferral in this. Thanks.
Right, colleagues, thank you very much. Councillor Salmond.
You're on mute, Councillor Salmond.
Councillor Salmond.
Apologies there. Sorry, can I just pick up with Mrs. Patterson there? The point I think she made that if we agree to defer this, there could be delays in determining planning applications.
In the election, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Could you possible times, as in months, there could be delays there could be important planning applications for businesses that may be affected by the planning applications not being determined. So can you give us some time frame on the possible delays before we make a decision?
Yes, I'm happy to, Councillor Salmond. So we do have current applications sitting. As I mentioned, it's applications that are significantly contrary to development plan that would normally go to full council, and we do probably have some live applications that are likely to hit that criteria. The implications are that, and I'm just liaising with legal colleagues as we speak, is that we may be unlikely to be able to hold meetings prior to the pre-election period, and that leaves us open to those developers appealing on non-determination grounds because they've passed the statutory timescales for dealing with those applications. In those scenarios, those applications would go to Scottish Government ministers to be heard by an independent reporter. So that is the potential implications of those. I'm just liaising, as I say, with legal colleagues just for a steer on the scope for any special meetings of full council to consider these types of applications during the pre-election period, and I'm just waiting to hear back from them, and they may well come in to the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ms. Barton.
On the back of that, please.
Speak, Alec. Yeah.
Sorry, this is it's not a point of order, but it's a question on the basis of what Ms. Patterson has said. If it is competent for the Development Standards Committee to hear those applications in the pre-election period, why is it not competent for full council to hear those applications in the pre-election period? And there is no difficulty in saying now we are on virtual meetings. The meeting of full council as the Development Standards Committee. The only difference would be that all members would be members of the Development Standards Committee that day.
Yeah.
So if these applications can be heard within the pre-election period, there is absolutely no reason why all members should not be deal with them.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Ms. Patterson, that's exactly what she's looking at now, waiting on advice from the department. Ms. Buchanan, you want to?
Yes, thank you, Provost. I wasn't aware that there was these planning applications pending, and of course, understandably, I don't think we expected the report to go the way it has, but that's perfectly fine. Members, of course, want to take time and feel they make the right decision. Could I ask for a 10-minute adjournment just to discuss the matter with Ms Patterson and also perhaps involve the returning officer? Maybe, in fact, 15 minutes, because you know how time goes past a lot quicker when you're in an adjournment than when you're in council, and that'll just give us time just to discuss it and come back. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Ms Buchanan. So we will adjourn now and reconvene at 15:15.
Once we hear the advice, please.
Say again?
Can I reserve the right to come back once we hear the advice?
Yep, okay. got on my advice. Jill, Ms. Patterson.
Thank you, Provost. So just to recap, there's two options available to members today, is to agree the recommendation in the report as is in front of you today, or to not agree the recommendation and leave the current arrangements in terms of the order of reference as existing. I have spoken to colleagues and the returning officer has indicated that they would be willing to hold a special full council meeting election period. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Jill. But first of all, Councillor Lumgear, are you wishing to move the report as is? You're muted, Councillor Lumgear.
Yes, I move the report as it stands.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Nicholl. Okay, and for the second option, to leave as is, Councillor Cheap.
Yep.
And a seconder.
I think Councillor Moore is going to second.
I'm coming in to second there.
Councillor Cheap.
Councillor King, what were you saying there?
I'm saying I'm coming in there. I didn't see Councillor Moore's hand.
You can't see his hand.
Can I just confirm with Councillor Cheap? Can I just confirm?
What we've got is option one is, and it's been moved by Councillor Lumgear and seconded by Councillor Nicholl, that the report as is, and the amendment is for option two, which has been proposed by Councillor Cheap and seconded by, well, Councillor Moore said he was happy to second it, but I mean that's Councillor Moore.
My amendment, if you like, is actually to defer it to next to the full council once the new council is elected. I'm letting you know what I'm telling you what my amendment is before you make a decision on it.
Amendment before Councillor Cheek did. He spoke about a delay, and I said either I would support the delay or I would give notice of an amendment. And it was my amendment that we don't change the order and keep as is. So what's being proposed now as the amendment was actually the amendment I suggested.
Yes, that's
correct, Councillor Hunt.
And I'll second that.
Can I ask it to include reference referring the matter to the governance MOG in the meantime? Because the governance MOG is dealing with the changes to standing orders that will be brought in for the new council.
I would be happy to add that into the amendment, Provost.
Hang on, I'm just going to speak to Mrs. Buchanan.
Yes, by implication, Provost, that would happen. Technically, any amendments that are in favour of the report or against it or are looking to remit it elsewhere should be given by 5 o'clock the night before to the Director of Legal. But certainly by implication, the governance MOG could look at this. There's not a problem with that because it's included within their terms of reference.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Councillor King.
Yeah. Yes, I'm happy with that.
Okay.
And if you need a seconder, I'll second a Councillor Hand.
Councillor Devine's already done that, but I'm happy to give way on my amendment in that case in favour of Councillor Hands.
Okay, so we've got an amendment by Councillor Hand and a seconder. Councillor King.
Devine, Councillor Devine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Do you want
Called working together.
clarify? So there was Lumgear, seconded by Councillor Nicholl, as that we agree the recommendations in report 3722. The amendment seconded by Councillor Hand, seconded by Councillor Devine, is that the council do not change the order of reference and that all major applications go to full council, and that this will also be considered by the governance law.
Okay, we happy with that, colleagues?
Okay, colleague will take the vote. Please vote motion or amendment. Provost.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost.
Amendment.
Amendment.
Councillor Boyd.
Amendment.
Councillor Brace.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown.
Move on.
Motion.
Councillor Cheap.
Amendment.
Councillor Devine.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Durno.
Amendment.
Councillor Fairweather.
Motion.
Councillor Hands.
Amendment.
Councillor King.
Amendment.
Councillor Laurie.
Amendment.
Councillor Longear.
Motion.
Councillor Macmillan Douglas.
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald.
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Moore.
Amendment.
Councillor Miles.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Salmond.
Motion.
Councillor Speed.
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Wan.
Motion.
Councillor Whiteside.
Amendment.
The amendment's carried by 16 votes to 10.
Amendments carried 16 votes to 10. Thank you. We can now move on to item 6, Angus Council, Angus Alive update. I'm going to ask Smith to speak. Councillor Devine, I see your hands up. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Hand.
No, it's okay. I've got I've just got a question.
Okay, this is on number 5, yeah? Or on
Yep.
6? Number 5, yeah. go on.
6.
6.
No, number 6. Number 6.
Yeah, well, can we hear Vivian Smith and then you
Sure.
quick. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Right, Ms. Smith, Vivian.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. And I'm happy to bring this report to members today on the Angus Alive position. There are 3 aspects mainly in this report. The first relates to an opportunity that's arisen with the Moneyfeith Community Resource Group to look at a potential integrated library access facility with the community in Moneyfeith. And we're seeking an in-principle agreement from Council to look to engage with the community more widely around that as a potential future opportunity. Council already agreed funding for Moneyfeith Community Resource Group through the place-based investment programme, so their funding is absolutely in place now, and this is just about seeking to explore further would it be useful for the sustainability of the provision, both in terms of what Moneyfeith Community Resource Group want to do and the library access want to do for the future in the town. So it's seeking that agreement in principle. The second aspect relates to the vaccination centres. NHS Tayside have indicated to us that they require the vaccination centres that are currently operating over the next year to the 31st of March 2023. And the recommendation before members today is to agree that, subject to the continued look for alternative premises and also subject to a financial agreement, which I can say would be directly beneficial to Angus Alive should that be agreed. And the third aspect is dealing with the temporary operating arrangements. The financial position for Angus Alive remains constrained, and the operating positions that are suggested are set out in the appendix. And Kirsty Hunt is here today and would be able to provide any of the detail around that. One of the things that's come forward in the proposals is the opening of the museums on a seasonal basis in both Kirriemuir and Brechin, which I think is a positive move from where we've been pandemic. So happy to take any questions, Provost. And as I say, Kirsty Hunter is also on the call for any detail of the specification.
Okay, thanks very much, Smith. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Provost. I'm just wondering if Ms Smith would be willing to take on a short proposal on recommendation 2, and that would be that a report would come forward, a further report would come forward at the June Council meeting, just giving us an update on the progress of finding somewhere else rather than the Reid Hall, because obviously, and I'm sure you understand this, as a resource, the Reid Hall is very important to Forfar. It's the biggest venue we've got for bigger weddings, for theatre events, etc., etc. So I don't really want to see it out of commission until March 23. We agreed till March 22, and that was bad enough. But can you just accept that? I don't want to do an amendment, don't want to go through all of that. Would that be a possibility?
Provost, through yourself, Councillor Devine, we would be intending to bring a report on Angus Alive, the whole of the transformation project that you'll be aware that we've been working on up to the June committee. And absolutely, we would be looking to give an update on where we are in terms of the opportunities for finding other solutions. I'm clear that the halls are used quite substantially by communities, and there is an aspect of that's not going to be able to take place as they're continually used for vaccination centres. What I can assure Council is that there is ongoing work in Forfar and elsewhere in Angus and Montrose and in Arbroath to look at those alternatives, and our property services are working closely with NHS Tayside to do that, and I'm absolutely happy to bring something back in June to give an update to members on progress.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hans.
Legacy hand, but I might comment in a wee minute.
Yeah, sound off, Councillor Hans. Sounds off.
Provost, it was a legacy hand, but I'll probably put my hand up again for a comment in a minute.
Well, okay, when the comments come, we're still on questions. Thanks very much for that. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. I agree with Councillor Devine on what she's saying there. In regards to Montrose Town Hall, obviously that's been out of commission now 2 years, I think, that they've had that. And obviously we're getting back now into whatever the new normal is. People's going out. We've got weddings. It's the biggest venue in Montrose for weddings as well. And that's obviously been taken out of commission for the use for this vaccinations. I mean, I fully support obviously getting the vaccinations done, but it's just, in terms of Montrose, the Montrose Town Hall is huge compared to what they actually really need for doing the vaccinations. or it appears to be anyway. And I just wondered how active, it says at 5.3 that options have been explored by the Director of Infrastructure and NHS Tayside. Is it really our role to identify these, or would that be more of a role for NHS Tayside to look at other venues that might be available to them? I don't know, maybe someone can answer that. And one of the other things that has popped up in regards to the requirements for these venues is it appears to be one door for going in and one door for coming out. Now, I'm not quite understanding why that is a requirement, because, for instance, other Angus Alive venues, Montrose Sports Centre, it's one door in and the same door out. And we've got plenty of people using these venues whenever they're going in swimming or whatever. We've got supermarkets, it's one door in and one door out. So I'm not understanding the logic behind this at vaccination centres. And, I would hope that we could identify other places for them, Montrose and Forfar. I think, is that the only two towns that are really affected by this? So, yeah, I would like to see what we're going to do about that.
You've heard what Ms Smith said, they're actively looking. But do you want to expand on that further, Vivian?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Proctor. Councillor Stewart's absolutely right. These venues in Arbroath, Montrose and Forfar are really valued by local communities and used really well in normal circumstances. However, with the pandemic and the need for continued vaccinations, and not just vaccinations against COVID, but potentially some other vaccinations, NHS Tayside are clear they want to be delivering those locally. But I give that assurance, Councillor Stewart, that we are absolutely looking for alternatives, and I'll bring something back in June.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Can I just have a supplementary?
Very quick one.
Okay, so obviously, is there someone that could answer the question regarding the one door in, one door out? And also, people getting vaccinations locally. I was made aware last night by two individuals that I was in the company of, that they're from Montrose and they have had their vaccination notice to go and get theirs done in Forfar. So I can't understand. To me, that's not locally for people that reside in Montrose.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, that's not really within the Ms Smith. David,
no, I understand that, but is there something on the call?
I hear exactly what you're
one out.
Yeah, I reckon, Kirsty Hunter, would you maybe be able to give an answer on that one? With Montrose Town Hall.
Thank you, Provost. So not an answer on the one door in, one door out. That's obviously the arrangements that have been put in place by colleagues within NHS Tayside with regards to how they're choosing to operate those venues. So I think that's one that would have to be referred to them. However, I was looking to come in just to give elected members reassurance that subsequent to the paper being agreed for committee today, we have reached agreement between all parties with regards to the remuneration for use of the vaccination centres in 2021-22, and should the recommendation be agreed today by elected members, subsequently into 22-23 for any proportion of time that was in place for. Also, would just like to reassure you that in the conversations that were held with NHS Tayside, that it did make it really clear that a long-term sustainable solution which enables those facilities to come back into use by communities to help support both physical and mental health because of the types of activities that can happen there, and the fact that those are venues where certain types of activities can only happen there, so larger concerts, larger weddings, dinner dances, all of those kind of events. So they definitely are aware of that and very much took that on board. But we have had an imperative within the charity to make sure that we are working together with council colleagues to support the public health efforts that are required to protect all of the community at this time, and that's why we have agreed through the board of directors and with council colleagues to make sure that this recommendation came forward to you today.
Okay, thanks very much, Kirsty. Councillor Stewart, regarding the reason we'll have to get on to our health service colleagues, but just what you're saying about somebody from Montrose being sent to Forfar. I went for a test because some of my family had COVID, and I was sent to Glenrothes, Montrose, Forfar, and Arbroath were full, and I had to drive all the way to Glenrothes. So there you go. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Provost. Ask a quick question on the item about the Monifeith Library. It's a really positive development, I believe. It's good to see a collaborative approach being brought forward between the Council and Angus Alive and MCRG. And it's good that there's going to be public engagement around this proposal, and hopefully we'll find a mutually beneficial solution. My question's around the bus services that access the new facility, and just for, I'm sure some members of the public might want reassurance that we're looking at possible solutions to improve this access. And also I'm wondering if Ms Smith thinks that this could provide a model for other areas to look at in future, because it's quite imaginative, as I said.
Provost, thanks, Councillor Whiteside, and yes, in relation to the transport question, it's certainly something that we would want to look at, and that ability to bring buses down behind the back of the kind of main road that goes through Monifeith is something that we would look at in some detail as part of the proposals. It is innovative and it has the potential to be a really good joint partnership arrangement, but obviously that's subject to engagement with the broader community to see, you know, what the feelings are there and what the opportunities are for the development. But I'm very probably excited is the word to use, between what's happening with Angus Alive and the local group and the possibilities that brings. But it does involve that wider engagement with the community to see how we can bring something that's really sustainable for Monifeith for the future. So hopefully that answers your questions. Absolutely, it could be a model for other areas.
Okay. Thanks very much. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Provost. And yeah, I wanted to thank Kirsty for the answer she's given me to some questions I raised via email earlier. That's been really helpful. I guess what I wanted to pick up on the back of that was around my hope that I can get some assurances around a longer term future for the Gateway to the Glens Museum in Kirrie, because it's such a wee gem. I see it very much as a destination, as you know, as we look at how our town centres are used and developed as a place where people can stay and experience different things, and not purely as a retail centre. And I would like to reinforce what Councillor Devine said around the importance of town halls and, you know, that mental health aspect of being a community venue, how wonderful it was we were able to resolve the Kirrie Panto situation. For example, it'd be lovely to see that replicated wider across Angus this coming year. So my question is around an assurance around the longer term future of the Gateway to the Glens beyond the restricted hours that are being asked for in this paper. Thanks.
Okay, Kirsty Hunter.
Thanks, Provost, and thank you, Councillor Bell, for the question. I think I would say that, as with all areas of the organisation, we're working very closely with council colleagues through the transformation project to look at beyond 2022-23, what are the proposals that are going to be brought forward to achieve a sustainable future for culture, sport and leisure services in the entirety of Angus. So that is something that we are looking at with Vivian and her team, and we'll be looking to bring back initial papers, as Vivian said, in response to the earlier question around the vaccination centres to the June meeting. So whilst I can't give any confirmations about any particular facilities at this particular meeting, I can reassure you that we are looking at all facilities and what would be a potential way forward for the years beyond 22-23. And I think it's really positive that we are able to, within the budgets for this next year, which are, as Vivian said, still very challenging, utilise the resource that we do have to make sure that the gateway to the Glens is open. The changes as well that there have been to the COVID restrictions mean that particularly for that facility, which is a smaller facility with different challenges around capacities and ventilations, which were much more significant in the prior regime of regulations, it's really exciting that we're able to get that one back open for the 7-month summer season.
Thank you very much for that, Kirsty. And I'm always very, very interested and played quite an important role with the Gateway to the Glens Museum, so I'd like to see it back on track as well. But thank you for the heads up. Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Yeah, similar to colleagues that have already spoken, I was seeking feedback and further insight with regards to the proposals to extend the use of the community centre for delivering the vaccination programme, as well as library access opening hours of 11 AM and also the Saltire Centre's weekend operating times. So yeah, firstly, just with regards to the community centre, similar concerns to what other colleagues have raised within their localities. The community centre is a large building that was utilised, well before, and a further 12 months does seem like a lengthy extension. It would be interesting to know kind of the current footfall and the projected footfall over the next year to deliver the vaccination programme, and as well as wondering whether, could a smaller space within that centre be used for the programme to allow it to be utilised, the main hall to be utilised more. And with regards to the library access opening hours, I have witnessed people seeking early morning entry to the library, as well as large queues forming before 11 AM. I have previously raised concerns around that before. And with regards to the Saltire, I'm concerned that a 12 noon closure on a weekend is not meeting the needs of the community in an area of the town where we recognise there is a need to maximise sport and leisure, and as well as health and wellbeing opportunities. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Speed. Kirsty Hunter, could you maybe give some information on the library and the Saltire Centre in Arbroath? Because I really don't feel that Ms Smith maybe would have all these answers. So could you maybe help out there, please?
Yes, thanks, Provost, and thank you to Councillor Speed for the questions. Arbroath Community Centre, I can give you reassurance that that is included within the comments that I made earlier with regards to vaccination centres. So it was for all 3 vaccination centres that I was making those remarks. Moving on to the library opening hours. So we have been reviewing the footfall in the libraries and also trying to make sure that we work within the budget that we have available. I understand that it is not ideal in terms of what we would want to necessarily be offering, but we are trying to make sure that the charity remains operating on a legal basis, i.e. within the financial parameters that we have and the financial envelope. And it's really important to do that because we cannot be in a deficit as a charity from a legal perspective and continue to operate. One of the challenges around that has been looking at the library opening hours. We are monitoring the situation at each of the sites. If there are requirements in the future to look at different, we'd be able to bring those back to future meetings. But to give certainty to the staff that work in those facilities and also to the customers that use them, so that we can model activities that are happening in those spaces over the next few months and into 2022-23. That is why we want to retain the opening hours as they are at this time. Moving on to Saltire Sports Centre, we've had different operating hours at weekends in our different venues in Angus, even pre-pandemic, and those have been based again on usage that's been seen in the sites. The reason that the Saltire has less opening hours at the weekend, or fewer opening hours at the weekend, is as a result of the activity that there has been at that sort of time previously in terms of customer demand. So that's the reason for the difference there between some of the other sites that we have across Angus and the Saltire Sports Centre. So it's based on customer demand.
Okay, Kirsty, thank you very much. I'm just going to ask Ms. Gail Smith if she would just like to come in and answer some of the questions that you're on about regarding vaccination. You know, the one about Councillor Stewart about the doors, etc. Because representative from the Health Board. Gail.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, Councillor Stewart, I would like to say in relation to the Montrose capacity issue in the Montrose Town Hall, I am aware that they've been providing blood transfusions on occasions and taking blood from people, so that may well be the reason that these families were asked to attend another venue. However, if that wasn't suitable, they absolutely can reschedule their appointment and they can be seen in Montrose. So that wouldn't be a problem if they have travel problems. In response to the second question, which was regard to the one door in, one door out, can Councillor Stewart maybe contact Public Health, Dr. Daniel Chandler? His email address is just daniel.chandler@nhs.scot, and I'm sure he'll be able to explain that situation, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Right, thanks very much for that, Gail. That's most informative. To go through hands, Councillor Speed, your hand's still up, so I presume that's historic. We're now going on to Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Provost. Ms Smith, I'm afraid I'm coming back to the old cherry, the use of the 3 centres till March next year. I've just been looking at the figures. 94% of Angus population have had their first dose, 89% have had their second dose, and 74% have had their third dose or booster. And I'm just wondering, with these figures, whether we actually need to have the centres tied up till the 31st of March next year, or seeing as Ms Sturgeon, when asked about Test and Protect, said it would be reviewed in the autumn, whether we should be just tying it up till autumn so that we have the opportunity to free these premises up for things like Christmas fairs, which bring in money for the local community and will bring in rents for the centres. I'm surprised. I was actually just surprised to hear that we're not just doing vaccinations, but things like blood transfusions in the centres, because I thought they were just vaccination. But has there been a modification to the agreement?
Gail Smith.
Will I?
Yeah, no, we've got a rare situation at the moment where we're requiring more blood from people. So it's a blood transfusion service that are working out of these centres. And there's also, they're looking at providing flu vaccinations from there as well to increase the uptake of flu to people in the public. I'm not involved with the venues regarding, so I couldn't tell you what the plans are, but my colleagues in public health will certainly be able to do that.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
No, I'm asking about reviewing in autumn.
Yeah,
as well.
Gail, any thoughts on the timing, or you know, we've got down 23, but I think that's that's something
I can only say, Provost, that obviously the autumn is when we provide flu vaccinations to the public. Yeah. So that may be what they're looking at in that period of time.
Yeah, thanks for that bit. But I know Vivian Smith gave assurances, and she's sitting there with her hand up again, and she's just away to give more assurances. Okay, Vivian, please.
Thanks, Provost, and it is more assurances. around, you know, bringing this back, looking at it in a lot of detail in terms of other venues for the future. However, the request that came in from NHS Tayside was the need for the year, and that was based on their anticipation of the number of vaccines that they will have to give over the course of the year, and not necessarily just in relation to COVID vaccines or boosters, but flu, as Ms Smith mentioned, and possibly some other vaccines as well. When the blood transfusion service has been using the venues, we have taken the venues back from NHS Tayside to be able to provide that, and then given it back again. So I think there is a good relationship between NHS Tayside and Angus Council, and they are absolutely assuring us that they are willing to look at other venues should we be able to source them. Members will be familiar that in Dundee, for example, the Caird Hall was used extensively initially, and now they're using some shopfront premises. Unfortunately, that's not been something that we've been able to identify in Angus to date. But that doesn't mean we won't keep looking, and there are other alternatives that may be becoming available. But right at this time, this is about giving the public health assurance that we are working in partnership to enable that broader community health response.
Okay, thanks very much. And I think the assurance has been well given. Okay, thanks, Councillor Moore. Councillor Brown, your question?
No, it's not. It's
a comment in a minute. Then, if you've got a question, fine. Ask it. If not, I'll come back for comments in a minute. Okay. Is that a question?
No, it's not a question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bray's a question.
Yeah,
go on.
Yes, I do have a question, and it's on recommendation 3, and it's very similar to the question Councillor Bell asked regarding the Glens Museum, and I wonder just what the situation is at the Brechin Museum. We have a tourism initiative that's going on, and I really think that the Townhouse Museum in Brechin has a role to play in that. Pleased that it's opening again in the spring, disappointed that it's to be closed in the winter. But it's clear in the paper that this is temporary and it applies only to the 2022-23. That's what we're agreeing and nothing more. Am I correct in that assumption? And could you just give me reassurance that that you will be looking at Brechin and with a positive attitude? Thank you.
Kirsty Hunter, I know what your answer is going to be, but please answer the question to Councillor Bray, please.
Thank you, Provost. And Councillor Bray, I can give the same reassurance as I gave to Councillor Bell with regards to the Brechin Townhouse Museum. I guess maybe something that might be helpful to add is that the 7 months that we're going to be opening from 1st of April to 31st of October does take in, obviously, the school holiday periods in April and October. We've done that on purpose. Also, if you look at previous year figures, this is obviously pre-pandemic, you can see that with regards to Kirriemuir Gateway to the Glen, there was 88% of all visitors that came within that time period. And if you look at Brechin Townhouse Museum, 81% of all visitors attended those two museums during that 7-month operational period. So I'm hopeful that the vast majority of visitors who normally are attending those excellent facilities will get that opportunity in the 7 months that they will be open. As I said to Councillor Bell, we are reviewing, along with all of our venues across each of the service areas throughout Angus, what the future shape of services for culture, sport and leisure will need to look like as part of the transformation project. And I would just maybe remind all colleagues that we are dealing with a situation at the moment where the impact of COVID is still being felt significantly by the charity. We are in a position where our income from our Be Active membership is still at around 60% of what it was pre-pandemic. That is a similar figure. I'm still regularly in contact with colleagues nationally across Scotland, and we are very much in the same ballpark as other trusts are finding themselves at the moment with those figures. I'd also comment that with regards to other income, it is even less than 60%. So it is a very difficult and challenging situation. However, the investment that was agreed at the council meeting in December into our sports facilities will hopefully help to ensure that we can maintain current income and look to be starting to grow that again now that we're in a period where hopefully restrictions are not only eased but will continue to remain so, and we can get people back in and enjoying the kinds of activities and events across all the different service areas as they did previously.
Okay, thank
you. Thank you very much, Kirsty, and I'm absolutely in no doubt about the extreme situation that Angus Alive faces and the need for these measures, and but yet they are temporary and they're for this year only, and there is a plan that's being worked on for the future beyond that. Okay, much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bates. Thanks very much for your answer, Kirsty. Councillor Hans, have you got a question?
You have a question now, Provost. Yeah.
I'm taking questions. If it's a comment of...
I beg your pardon? Sorry?
I said I'm taking questions. If it's a question, that's fine. If it's a comment, it's later on, okay?
It's a question. It's a question. Yeah, it's for Vivian Smith. Vivian, the report's asking us to agree in principle for the engagement process to go forward, and I'm really pleased about that. I just wanted to find out a little bit more about the planned engagement, because I can see there's a few plates in the air with this one, because obviously MCRG, now that all the fund is in place, we want that resource to go forward as quickly as possible. However, we also want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to participate in the engagement process. And I wonder as well, obviously we've got the meeting in Moneyfief next Thursday at the Community Council, and the members of the public are obviously welcome to come along to that. I just wonder, looking at the potential scope for any issues raised to be part of that engagement. So really, how inclusive can we make sure the engagement process is? How long is it likely to last? And are people able to actually help shape the nature of that engagement?
That's quite a big question.
It is.
Ms. Smith, Vivian, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, thanks, Provost, and thanks, Councillor Hans. Yeah, the engagement piece is going to be absolutely critical to this. And, from where we are just now, the Community Council meeting next week will kick that off. I would intend to go along to that, and I know Kirsty is hoping to do that as well. There's some work underway in the background between Kirsty and the communities officers who work locally in the area with the local group to actually design that broader consultation. I don't see it needing to take too long. I'm aware that the local group are really time ambitious, let's say, in terms of moving on with the actual project. So we'll be open to any responses and any engagement, but we'll kick it off next Thursday and then move it on from there, Sheila, in a very pacey way. I hope that helps to reassure you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Vivian.
Okay, thanks very much, Vivian. Any other questions? Okay, comments, Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Yes. I would just like to support Councillor Devine. The Reid Hall really was gifted to the people of Forfar. you could not get a booking pre COVID. So I kind of understand why we're now still in the vaccination venue. There's been weddings, no pantomime for 2 years. Shows have never been for 2 years. And the Forfar people on the street are certainly very well aware of this, and they'll all have had their vaccination and be grateful for their vaccination, but it's going on a long time.
Well, I think, Councillor Brown, I think it's been well, you know, I think Vivian Smith's gonna, like a record be a cracking it, saying that she is actually, and her team and Angus Alive are working hard to see if we can get another venue. And I know you're a local man, and you might, if you know any place, tip them off, and then you'll get the Reed Hall back. But Vivian, do you want to just add to that?
Thanks, Provost. But as you say, you know, we're absolutely aware that, you know, communities really value these facilities for all sorts of reasons. Some for their own fundraising efforts, etc. But the situation is that they are needed for that health matter on a continued basis. But we will keep looking for alternative venues. I know that Gavin Balfour has been having meetings, and he's hopeful that we will be able to find some solutions in and around that area.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Brown, are you happy with that answer?
Well, I'm not happy, but I've accepted my answer.
Okay, I'd just like to say something, make a comment, if I may. And I feel that Angus Alive and Kirsty Hunter and their team have done an exceptional job over a very, very difficult period. You know, there's a lot of financial restraints, the COVID and everything else, and it's been quite a hard balancing, juggling act. And I think they've actually continued to give the people of Angus, not the best because they couldn't do it, but the best within the resources they have. You know, assistance and facilities, and of course this has been supported by us from Angus Council financially and in kind. But I think actually, as far as Angus is Alive is, we you know, everything's not perfect, but there's a lot of hard work being done by, and indeed by Vivian Smith and the council officers, and I think we should be thankful for them. But that's my Thomas worth. So I'll then move on. Councillor Miles, you've not had a chance to speak.
Provost, and if I could wear my NHS Tayside hat and Public Health Committee hat just for a moment, I'd like to thank Angus Alive for the use of these venues. It was most welcome to get venues that were suitable, that ticked all the boxes for social distancing and others, to get the best vaccination programme almost anyone has ever seen in place. And the update in Angus is as good, if not better, than most others in the rest of Scotland. However, the time is to move on, and I can totally sympathise with the locals who are losing out and not getting their town halls for other uses. And as regulations change, I dare say other venues will become available and will become possible. And it is time to look at, as Vivian has already said, other possible venues, and hopefully they will come in due course. But in the meantime, vaccinations are still urgently required, or places for vaccinations are urgently required. And there's not just the first, second and booster. I've heard of people getting a fourth booster vaccine, and plus other flu jabs and other facilities. I also regret not having a vaccination centre in every borough, but its lack of staff to man these venues is meant that some have to be doubled up. I mean, for instance, people in Brecon have to go to Montrose to get the vaccinations. And again, that didn't go down too well. But to get the staff, not just the venue, to get the staff to man these centres, it meant that every borough couldn't get a centre in its own right. We'll look very actively at trying to provide more local centres and again staffed locally if at all possible, and that is continually being looked at. So we'll look at that and move on. But thanks again. But before I close, I'd like to express my thanks and welcome the reopening of the Brecon Townhouse Museum. It is going to be very welcome. Appreciate it's only for the summer months, but as these are the most popular months anyway, it'd be very welcome and look forward to a full opening in the future when circumstances allow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miles. Councillor Speed, I presume that's a historic hand because you've already spoken.
No, it was a comment.
Well, very quick one because we've got a lot of fight. Go on.
Yeah, it was really just picking up on Councillor Hans's theme with regards to public consultation and community engagement and participation. Not with regards to necessarily the Montefief situation, but just as a whole across Angus in terms of carrying out that bit of work. I would really kind of like to make a plea to see on future reporting what it is the public are saying with regards to Angus Alive and the services they provide. What is it that matters to them? What are the barriers? Why has there been is the reduction in membership uptake because of the pandemic, or is there something else? What is it that they would like to see Angus Alive deliver moving forward?
I know that Angus Alive do take cognizance of what you're saying, but I'll let Kirsty Hunter give you a very short, sharp, just a brief on what's going on.
Thanks, Provost. So we've been obviously in conversations with council officers, so Vivian and her team with regards to the transformation project, but also working with vibrant communities to look at how the engagement will need to look as part of that moving into future years. So it's definitely front and centre of the conversations that we've been having. We've also, over the course of the pandemic, introduced our new Have Your Say, and that enables people to provide feedback to us on a very regular basis through our both digital and forms and venue responses from customers. So any comments can be completed and submitted either online or, as I say, through the boxes that are at site, and we can get back to customers that way on a more, comment by comment or particular things that people are wanting to raise with us right now. Our new app has also provided additional functionality for people to start to provide their feedback on the service that's been run by the organisation too. So those things are going on anyway, but as I say, engagement is very much part of what we're discussing, and I can give you the assurance that vibrant communities are involved in those discussions to make sure that that is factored into the transformation project for the future.
Okay.
Would we be able to see a flavour of that? Are we going to see kind of some of that feedback on future reporting as kind of evidence as to, what the public are saying?
Vivian?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Absolutely, Councillor Speed. We would be looking to bring that forward as part of the transformation project that I'm talking about, bringing a report back around June time. I would anticipate that we would be bringing a report specifically around the output from the consultation or the engagement exercise that we'll have in Montefief. There will be other pieces of work that we need to progress with and alongside communities into the future, and we'll absolutely undertake to bring any of that back, as and when we get to specifics on the different transformational opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian. There are Councillor Speed. Your comments noted and your question, second one, answered. Okay, Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I just like to think the
development in Montefief with the library and the community centre, I think, is to be welcomed. It's quite an innovative idea, and I think one that's worthy of support. I did feel that the previous plea by local members to retain the library in the high street was an unwise move, and I'm glad that we've now come up with perhaps a better option. The second thing I would like to say, and like Councillor Miles, I'll remind you that I'm chair of the Finance and Audit Subcommittee of Angus Alive, and I would just point one or two things out to you. In the current financial year, I think Angus Alive has been asked to make a saving of 458,000 as part of the council's change plan, and that follows significant savings in previous years. So there is a clear relationship between services and funding, and while Kirsty and her team have done a great job, they are not alchemists. They can't turn base metal into gold. So when you consider the budget in several weeks' time and you look at the change plan, I would ask you to look at that closely, because clearly if there are reductions in the subsidy to Angus Alive, that inevitably will have impacts on services that the charity can provide. That there is a clear relationship, and as others have mentioned, the pandemic has been playing havoc with the charity's income because of the reduced attendance at sports centres, which is obviously the main source of public funding to the charity. So I say it's your concern about your facilities in your ward are interesting to hear, but you need to look at the future funding going ahead, because there is clearly a relationship between the level of subsidy and the level of services that Angus Alive can deliver.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Duff. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. I'd also like to, the first one is very similar in many ways to Councillor Duff's. Councillor Duff will be well aware through that Angus Council is the second lowest funded council per head of population in Scotland, and therefore right throughout the council, whether we're talking about the main sort of central council activities or alleywways like Angus Alive, things have got to be done very effectively, and I really think they have been. I think the partnership between Angus Council and Angus Alive over the 2 years of the pandemic has been absolutely excellent. I go back, not through the excellence, but having seen it as finance convener at the time, and since then, of course, Councillor Salmond has been doing great work in that respect. And Ian Lorimer and Vivian Smith and Kirsty Hunter and their teams have been working closely together. And I think we've come through that extremely well. But of course, we must learn from that to improve efficiency again more into the future. I'd like to support the temporary operations position. Looking particularly at Kirriemuir, I'm glad that the library is open 18 hours a week. I'd like to be open more, but that's an extremely good start. The Webster Sports Centre open Mondays to Fridays and on Saturday mornings. I'm disappointed it's closed on Sunday because it's so important for young people to be able to get back and to have physical activity, but I'm sure that'll come along. And the gateway to the Glens Museum, which I always think is Provost Proctor's museum because of the terrific work he did on that when he was chair of the Community Council in Kirriemuir. I really do hope, even though 88%, if I caught Kirsty right, of the activity is during the summer months or the summer, autumn and spring months, perhaps pushing it harder will increase the 12% in the winter months. So I'm sure you'll make progress there in the future. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor McMillan Douglas. Councillor Moore, your comment?
Yes, thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like to commend Vivian and Kirsty and their teams for managing to achieve what they've achieved so far. I'm slightly concerned that additional uses are coming in, which sound like they're causing delays. But the only issue I've really got is that I would like to see a review in 6 months' time to see where we are at, to see whether this can be scaled down, possibly local health centres or Whitehills Hospital for Forfar sort of thing, and then we can get these buildings back into community use in time for Christmas.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Mayor. I think that message is going across loud and clear to Vivian Smith and indeed to Kirsty. I think that's going across. I'll now ask for a comment. The last of the best.
Thank you, Provost. It'll be a comment, but it's actually a solution to the whole situation, of which I think Vivian Smith will no doubt will not be surprised by my comments. So, as we all know, historically, the South Angus did not get any vaccination centres, and there were reasons for that, but we were told that people were happy to move all round Angus. We've heard the Provost saying that he can move to, he was happy even to go to Glenrothes. So I have a solution to the whole situation that will help Forfar Panto and the Forfar Musical Society, because they can't get into their place. I'm Montrose because they've only got a one door in and one door out situation, because the Beach Hall part of our leisure centre in Carnoustie has a one door in and one door out and can clearly keep the leisure centre running, and therefore that helps Kirsty with her income, because I'm sure you would get far more income from our broths. Not leisure centre, the community centre. I'm sure you've got more income coming in there than what you would get from the beach hall part of the leisure centre in Carnoustie. And so I think there's a win-win for everyone here. And I hope you can take back my suggestions, Vivian, work with Kirsty and the health board to get this win-win situation so everyone can get back into the community centres. And of course, I don't think I'll get into trouble in Carnoustie, because the Carnoustie Panto Group or the Carnoustie Musical Society use the high school theatre. That'll do our shows there. But I think it's a win-win. My solution is a win-win for all. But of course, that's an operational matter, Vivian. So I shall put it over in your safe, capable hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyd, for your comments. We've got Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Provost. I'll keep it really, really brief. There's been loads of good discussion here, and thanks to the officers for all their comments. It probably would have been good to see some financial implications in the paper. That's the only point I want to make. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Whiteside. Colleagues, I think we've discussed this enough. I think officers have got the message. We want to get their venues back as soon as, and they're actually taking active steps towards that. So if the recommendations in paragraph 1, are the 3 recommendations, are they agreed?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 7, Common Good Funds project approval. We've got a couple of declarations of interest, so we'll give Councillor Stewart, Councillor Salmon time to move themselves to the chamber. Is that right?
Councillor Stewart and Councillor Salmon. I think that's
Right, colleagues, I'm going to ask Mr. Ian Cochrane to lead on this and give a bit of information and direction. We'll follow it up with questions and then with any comments, and then we'll move to the recommendations on the report. Mr. Cochrane.
Thanks, Provost. And to introduce report 3922, I would note that the report deals with the application for Montrose Playhouse project for a loan from Montrose Common Good. I would note that the report is in regard to that Common Good application only. And whilst members may be interested in the wider community project, if members wish to discuss that further, and if that relates to business affairs of Montrose Playhouse, the legal advice would be that members agree to have that information provided in a private session before we discuss such matters in public. So, focusing on the report before you this afternoon, as noted, it's a Common Good application. It is for a loan for Montrose Playhouse to address the time delay that they have
in regard to the charitable group having to pay the VAT on invoices when they pay the invoice, and then recovering that VAT from HMRC at a later stage. Members previously agreed a similar loan on that occasion for £40,000, which was repaid last October. And this loan that is before you this afternoon is to cover the final VAT payments following completion of the construction of the project. The common good monies would be released as and when the VAT is due, namely being when the payment for the construction works is being made, and that may mean that we release the money in stages as the invoices are paid. And as per the report, to secure the loan, ward members were minded to make it subject to director/sponsor guarantees, and which, if the council is in agreement to this condition this afternoon, we will discuss with the common good applicant, and the council is asked to delegate the authority to progress that to officers as set out in the recommendations of the report. And finally, I note that council officers will continue to work with Montrose Playhouse project to support them with their project.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Cochran, for that good full explanation. Right, colleagues, questions? Any questions? Okay, no questions. Comments? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'd like to thank Mr. Cochrane for what he said this afternoon, and also for his efforts in expediting this paper to full council. It would appear that I'm the only local member left standing on this one. I'm happy to support the recommendations. As a local member, I believe it's my responsibility to support local groups develop ambitious projects, and this is certainly an ambitious project. The group has done a good job in getting where they have, but as well as giving them moral support, I think we need to give them, in this case, a little bit of financial support, as Mr. Cochrane has outlined, getting over the finishing line. And members will note the conditions attached to 5.3, which I think Mr. Cochrane has alluded to provide protection for the Montrose Common Good Funds. So I'm happy to support it as a local member.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. You're not the last man standing. Councillor Sturrock's just arrived, and I'd just like to ask Councillor Sturrock, have you got any declarations of interest? And we're on item 7 of the agenda, the Common Good Funds project approval for Montrose. Councillor Sturrock.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Not long joined this discussion. I have not been part of the whole agenda items this afternoon, so I feel at the moment I should not be commenting.
Okay, but have you got any declaration?
I have no declaration.
Pardon? Have you got any declaration of interest?
Provost, I have no declaration of interest. Okay. Already said.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Sturrock. Thank you. Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Just a sort of procedural question. Indicates in the paper that 3 ward members indicated support, but we've got people that have then left the room, and it just doesn't really tie up. And I don't really understand that, because we don't have a common good in Carnoustie district, and I just wondered, if you're not able to stay in the room and participate in the discussion, how come you're able to indicate a support for a project? Do you know what I mean? I'm generally just asking, I'm not asking to make mischief, I'm asking for a procedural point of view, how that can kind of both work. Because how can you support something, then not formally support it in the chamber? Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying, yeah, but at the end of the day, because they had been part of, and you heard the declaration to begin with, because they've been part, that's why they withdrew. But I'll let Mrs. Buchanan, our legal officer, give you a full answer Jackie.
Thank you, Provost. I don't know from the paper, I don't think it's detailed which members that Mr Cochrane consulted with, but I'm sure he can clarify. But obviously a conflict of interest only arises when a person becomes aware a conflict exists, and it could be the case that a conflict arose after the consultation, and that's only where the issue does arise, when the person's aware of a conflict.
Yeah, so thanks very much for that, Mr Buchanan. Councillor Fairweather.
Yeah, and of that for Councillor MacDonald, the elected member who didn't say anything regarding agreement did declare an interest, and the second one today, it was only because of something that's happened just latterly that he took advice and decided to declare an interest. So nothing untoward. Thank you.
I wasn't Councillor Fairbairn. I was just something that sort of flagged up when I was
yeah,
we had the declarations and then just going through the paper while we're going through this. I just thought it was interesting that we have the status, and it it didn't sort of tie in. But thanks for that clarification.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor MacDonald. That's fine. Councillor Duff, historic hand. Councillor Fairweather, a historic hand. Are there any other questions? Are there any comments? I presume that's a historic hand, Councillor Duff, for comments.
You presume right. It's not
Thank
going
you. Thank you. There'll be no other comments. Are you wanting to make a comment, Councillor Duff?
No, it's the IT's splitting up.
Okay, fair enough. There'll be no further comments, colleagues, or questions. Do we agree the recommendations set out at paragraph 1, at subpara 1, subpara 2, and subpara 3? Are these recommendations all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Colleagues, thank you very much for your forbearance, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye all.
Bye. 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 Bye.